Everyone, welcome back to, a Hockey Stories interview as much as anything else. Anthony Russell here from Banners on the Wall, joined by a man whose club have generated a variety of questions in over the last couple of weeks, but on the verge of a new adventure. I'm joined on the line by the general manager of the Whitley Warriors, the newest members of the Scottish National League, Willie Dunn. Willie, thanks for taking the time to speak to me this evening.
No problem, always a pleasure.
Have to ask the big question, of course, as I understand you are an Edinburgh boy, Hearts or Hibbies?
Hibs.
Proper answer. Well done. I
Yeah.
can hear Jay King, happy summer in the background. As an Edinburgh boy. We'll get right into the nitty gritty of this then, because this is obviously the news has come out. You've done a reverse Solway. You are the English team that's joined the Scottish League. People have seen the press release. People have read. They've kind of digested it a little bit. It's obviously a really, really exciting adventure for the club. A very, very different approach from the Warriors to join a league that in the SNL has been on the up. But the big question, I think, for a lot of people is why?
Why now? It's actually something that isn't that new about almost happening. During COVID, when I was with the Murrayfield Racers, I actually had a Zoom call with a number of teams, including Paul Matthews at Whitley Bay, about starting some kind of Northern Premier League with a couple of English teams and some Scottish teams. So it's something that's been talked about for a while. So from that point of view, you know, when Tony and I were actually being interviewed for the post, the owners of the team asked us about joining the SNL, and we didn't think at that time it was something that would be particularly sustainable and nor particularly welcome. But what the chronological order of things with this, from our point of view, I suppose dates back to last summer. We attended a fixture meeting for the NIHL North, as did all the teams apart from one. And we did this kind of, as Hayden Hunter called it, a dating system, where you would go to a table with the other team and see what dates you could do. So that was all great. And somebody had the dates for D-side, and all the fixtures were figured out then. It then transpired afterwards that they weren't particularly happy with a number of their fixtures, and so fixtures had to be changed. That led us to changing a couple of fixtures, which meant we had to play on Saturday nights, and I'll get to in a minute why that's really bad for Whitley Bay. It then transpired, bizarrely, we were meant to be playing Solihull near the end of the season. I think it was the end of February, and that's what we had in as a fixture away to Solway. They had the EIHA's website had the same fixture in as well, but apparently Solihull had to change their fixture and play D-side instead, but nobody had told us. So we were left towards the end of the season with this fixture and absolutely no dates to do it. And there was a lot of to and fro between the owners of the team who own the ice rink and the EIHA. And during that conversation, they were talking about us moving our Billingham game to a Saturday night at Whitley Bay. We'd already done 4 Saturday night fixtures, which was unheard of in Whitley Bay. And they wanted them to move this to the Saturday, and Claire from the rink said, "Look, we can't do that. We can't play Saturdays. It's really difficult for us to play Saturdays." She was then informed that, well, it does say within the rules that up to 50% of your games should be made available for a Saturday, and we're going to look at putting that in place for next season and beyond. That kind of scared the rink. And the reason for Saturdays, I know I watched your last podcast, you know, and you kind of said about Newcastle. Newcastle has an effect. Newcastle United have an effect on the crowd at Whitley Bay. One of the big surprises for me is just how passionate almost everybody is about Newcastle. But Newcastle also play on a Sunday. Right?
I think it's like Newcastle United played 7 Saturday home games in the 24-25 season, which 6 were during hockey season, which I think is why people will have sort of heard that and gone, well, hang on a second, 6 isn't a large amount.
That's only part of the jigsaw, you see. So even when they play on a Sunday and the game's finished before the hockey starts, it still has an impact on the number of people who come through the door. So you have the Newcastle effect, but you also have the Saturday night effect at Whitley Bay. Whitley Bay on Sundays is hockey night. It always has been hockey night, and that's where people are geared for. Anytime you move from that and it goes to a Saturday, we've played Saturday games when Newcastle haven't been playing, but we still had a 50% drop in crowds. Added to that, the public skating session, which is very, very, very popular in Whitley Bay on a Saturday night, has to be cancelled. And the face-off has to be 7 o'clock. So for teams coming from afar, it's an even longer time until they get home on the Saturday. So those are the kind of drivers from the business point of view of why Saturdays have never been particularly welcomed in Whitley Bay. And it's really difficult for them to square that circle because of all these things at different times at play. Now, the rink looked at this and looked at saying, well, look, okay, they didn't want to have 4 fixtures this year, so let's say that goes to 8 next year, which some people would say is reasonably reasonable. The knock-on effect for the business, both on the ice rink side and on the hockey side, was huge, which meant it wasn't going to be sustainable for us as a team to be able to cope with that drop of level of income. Bearing in mind as well, a lot of the teams in the NIHL North don't particularly bring a huge support to Whitley Bay because of the distance, except obviously 1 or 2 exceptions. Obviously Billingham and Blackburn as well bring half decent crowds. So they had looked at this and they had decided that they were going to face a huge financial impediment to keep the team going and keep the amount of funding that goes into hockey going at the same types of levels. And let's not beat about the bush, profits would go down because they would lose on the cafeteria side, they would lose the Saturday skating, us as a team, we would lose the 50-50 and all the rest of it. So it was not an attractive proposition. Also, we're told that this was a pressure from a number of teams that were further away who wanted to play on a Saturday night, so they weren't getting back late Sunday night, Monday morning. But at the same time, we had to go to those places like Solihull and Deeside, particularly. Nottingham, we were lucky the last couple of years because it was the other way. It was a 1 o'clock face-off in the afternoon. So the bus was leaving at 7 a.m. Tony and I were leaving at 3 to get down, right? And that, to be fair, there was a flip side to that where you were back reasonably early in the evening. But when our guys were going to Solihull and Deeside, Solihull, I think, was a 6 o'clock face-off the last time. The guys were getting back at 1, 2. Deeside as well was after 12 o'clock, 1, 2 in the morning. The way the league was setting out, with some options going forward, there was going to be relegation and promotion. There was talk of an 8-team top division, which meant you would go to these places 3 times and you would have to play them at home probably on a Saturday. So all that being the case, the rink looked at it and had a serious discussion about it. Tony and I went to meet them and they said, what do you guys think of this? And to be straight, Tony and I didn't particularly care one way or the other. Yeah, it's less away game travel time for us, but still has to go down for training, still have to go down for the home games and everything. We didn't. We were saying, this is your decision. It's not our decision. But here's the facts on the Scottish League. And we were able to put some meat on the bone on the SNL. Obviously, just a few years ago, we had a team in that particular league. The league's developed, as you know, over the last few years, a very, very high standard of hockey there, but also the own experience of the Warriors. When we came, if you remember, the best Warriors team in the last 20 years won the NIHL just before COVID. Murrayfield Racers bet them in the NIHL North final, right? We came down and won in overtime in the second leg at Whitley Bay. The following time it was played, they played Dundee Rockets. Sorry, that's the new team. Dundee Comets. It was the Comets and the Tigers, by the way. They played the Comets in the semi-final and lost home and away. The following year, they played the Edinburgh Capitals and lost home and away to them as well. So you're looking at standards. 2 seasons ago, it was that Blackburn took part in a tournament with some Scottish teams.
Yeah, the sort of mix of the Scottish Cup. They tried to Kilmarnock, Caldy, a few different places, and generally feedback from that tournament. Hawks fans, having spoken to people like Graham Hamilton and the like, were really, really positive about it. They really enjoyed the hockey they got.
Yeah, and Edinburgh bet them home and away. Right? And Kirkcaldy, I think, bet them in Kirkcaldy, I think it was. So in terms of standards, we don't see that there's a couple of weaker teams, and it's bad to say, there's a couple of weaker teams in every league in hockey.
And North one last season was a pretty wide tent, as it were, with all due respect to them. Nottingham obviously did improve on the last couple of years, but Sheffield struggled at times. Widnes heavily struggled at times. And the SNL, I mean, with again due respect to the North Air, we're on the end of some pretty heavy score lines. I mean, I think certainly the discussion has very much kind of been about the fact the SNL has been trending upwards. This is something I discussed with Jamie Thompson, of course, very heavily involved with SIH. I think the thing that the couple of things that kind of leap out at me about it is that, and I hate to go back to this kind of sort of Saturday night thing, but I think people genuinely will be interested in it, because ultimately a league is a collective. People will make sacrifices. Billingham, of course, have issues of it. Occasionally will have bits and pieces on the Saturday night. Obviously, the Forum does not have the same amount of capacity as Hillhead. I believe the capacity at the Forum is, I believe it's officially 777. He says, trying to remember the numbers he was given the other day. Hillhead's, of course, is significantly bigger.
Yeah.
But Billingham have taken the hit about playing on Saturdays as well. They will get vastly reduced crowds too. The response from people, I think, probably down south who maybe won't see some of these things will be, that's what's being in a league is about, Willie. It's about being part of a collective. Why should Whitley not join in where others are? I think will be the criticism from some calls.
Yeah, you're looking at a rink that's today 70 years old, right? And has been playing on Sundays and have built a following and a culture behind it. But you flip that round, you ask Solihull or a Blackburn struggle as well to play on, particularly Solihull, to play on a Saturday night. Planet Ice charged them almost 3 times the amount to hire the ice, right? Because it's more expensive, because they lose the skating session. Now, our team is owned by the same people that own the rink. So financially, they get hit all over the place if we play on a Saturday night, because we're not charged a rent, it's their rink. And some people will say, well, they can, it's their rink, they can afford it. Yeah. But that's a huge, we're talking thousands and thousands of pounds per game lost, regardless of anything else through catering, which is is there, and everything else I've said. They lose thousands and thousands of pounds per game in comparison to playing on the Sunday. Now, they have played Saturday games. It's not never the twain, particularly if it's the playoffs and you're not the seeded team and all of that, right? They've had to do it. Widnes, I think it was, we just couldn't find a space, so they said, right, okay, we'll play the Saturday. And then suddenly D-side, and we had all the problems with that, we had to play a Saturday. Blackburn, we played on the Saturday, which was different because it was the snow that caused that issue, and the game was postponed. They couldn't get out of Blackburn to get up to Whitley Bay. So that game was rearranged, and the only time that was there was a Saturday. But the hit that the team, that the rink took, has really spooked them on this, of the fallout. And I think maybe 2 of those games, there wasn't a Newcastle game on. It didn't matter because people are not geared. Sunday night is their hockey night. They go along on a Sunday night and they watch the hockey, and Saturday they'll go whatever they do with the kids or the family, or go to the pub or whatever. And it's a huge financial hit. So that was the driver. But also, from the player's point of view, and this is one of the things when you talk about travel distances that people, I saw somebody write on one of the forums, the travel times, added half an hour onto every Scottish one and took half an hour off every English one, right? And I found it quite amusing for somebody who actually travels the road. For us, Tony lives in Edinburgh. I stay just outside of Edinburgh. I've done it in 2 hours. 2.5 hours is more likely what's
entirely legally. If there are any policemen with speed bumps listening to us,
jump to hyperspace. But we do it all the time and know the roads and know the road conditions and all the rest of it. As long as there's not a tractor on the road, then it's fine from the travel point of view. But for our guys, the big difference is a Sunday night getting home to Whitley Bay at 1:30 and then having to travel to their houses. Most of them live geographically near Whitley Bay, but they still have to travel on a Sunday when they're working at 6 a.m. in the morning is a big issue for us, and it's a big issue to get players. And predating us, Whitley Bay's always struggled to take players away from home on Sundays. Sometimes it's Saturdays because of work, but Sundays it's a big problem for people. Now the SNL, all the teams in the SNL apart from one are Saturday teams. And so the away games would be on Saturdays mostly, except with the exception, I think, of Paisley, who play at Bray Head, and they're a 5 o'clock face-off. So when it's a 5 o'clock face-off in Whitley Bay, the vast majority of teams in Scotland, apart from Aberdeen, will be home for 11 o'clock, right? Because we're a 5 o'clock face-off as well. Now, Aberdeen's the one that's the furthest away. And John Colley, who is the chairman of Aberdeen, is also the chairman of the SNL. And so what we're looking at is maybe doing a double header, or the possibility of playing them on the Saturday and them playing us on the Saturday, and we'll still have one game or so, which we've done every year on the Saturday. Or we'll work out what's best for the clubs to try and make sure it's not too big of an issue. But they're up for that, because a lot of the clubs are welcoming us because we'll bring fans to the games. Aberdeen, funny enough, sell out every game without us. So John says we'll need to keep tickets back for you. But they have a good travel and support. And that's the other myth that goes around, is about the size of supports. Edinburgh get between 1,000 and 1,500 on average. They've had 2,500 when they have their New Year's Eve game and things, right? Dundee, when I was talking to the guys in Dundee, when they won the league, they got 1,700. Right, they're averaging around about 1,000 a game. Aberdeen, I think it only holds 700, but sold out every game. And yes, there's teams that have less support, but these teams actually carry big supports for away games as well. And as you called it at the start about it being an adventure, our players are really looking forward to seeing different people sitting in the penalty box with different people, compared to what they've been doing for the last God knows how many years in England. So, it is different. It might not work. Right? There's no, this is right, this is the right thing to do. But from a business point of view, financially, it makes sense for the owners to do it. From a hockey point of view, it's different. But there again, Whitley Bay's been playing these teams for decades. There
are echoes of Grandstand in the 80s, of course, being able to play in Dundee, in Fife, in Edinburgh, and bits and pieces like that. I don't think people are. I think people are looking at it from the outside as a bit of an eccentricity. If we take away that sort of contentious issue of playing on Saturdays and I don't think there's anybody looking at this and going, "Oh, this doesn't make any sense." I think the one thing I have seen from a few quarters that is potentially not very kind, but I think probably is probably worth addressing, because we may as well run towards all the elephants in the room.
Yeah.
You didn't have a great year last year. Very, very poor by Whitley standards. You're going to the SNL because you think you'll walk it. Is the criticism from some quarters. Now, not one that I think is necessarily fair, because again we've seen how Blackburn fared in that sort of cross cup as well. Whitley have played Edinburgh in this sort of little mini cup tournament, which the Warriors did win, of course. So definitely, so one chalk for south of the border. But like I say, I think the people just don't quite necessarily understand why you'd give up what and also and to an extent for the majority of clubs as well as work, you guys being an outlier makes it feel like, well, you've not got what you want in terms of home dates, maybe having to give up Saturdays, you've not done very well, you're taking your ball and walking across the border, I think is the feeling from a few people.
Yeah. I mean, if only we could go into the SNL and win every game and win the league, right? It won't happen. It just will not happen. And some people, if we're
not guaranteeing a Grand Slam before the season starts, everybody.
No.
So if it happens, we're putting the money at Ladbrokes now.
Listen, when we started the Racers, the first season we actually won the league undefeated. Right? We had 2 draws. It was before they did overtime. We had 2 draws, and we weren't the best. We weren't a great team. The second season we were a lot better, but the standard of the league has completely changed in that 5-6 years, and the dynamics has changed. And you talk about we had a poor season last year, I would agree with you, but there's a number of reasons for that, and it's a number that's kind of dawning on us after taking over, and certainly speaking to the previous incumbents who warned us about this, there's a lack of players coming through at Whitley Bay, which is one issue. So it's really difficult to attract somebody from Leeds, Sheffield, that central belt of England, to drive 2.5 hours to train and drive 2.5 hours to go home, and then away games and all the rest of it. It's really difficult to attract a player or players to come to the club to do that. And so we have to go down a kind of strategy of grow your own, which you've seen for the signings we've made so far this season. There's a lot of them very promising young players. I think the competitiveness at the top end of NIHL 1 makes it more difficult to give them as much ice time as they need and should have, which is one element of it. But last year, we had horrendous injuries, particularly towards the end of the season, where guys were out. Sean Kippen, our captain, he dislocated his shoulder. It was actually at the end of a fight, the guy, and Skippy's still not recovered from that. Right, still not recovered. They may need surgery on it. Ethan Reid broke his thumb. Callum Queenan, he was in a challenge with Gritans from Billingham. Wasn't a particularly dirty thing, but he's went over on his knee, and he's done his meniscus in his leg. So those 3 were out. There was someone else as well that was injured, all at the same time. And added to that, some interesting DOPS decisions post-match refereeing going on, people asking for video reviews of things, cost us players for half the season. And added to that, there is a problem which is endemic in Whitley Bay, that some guys work. You know, we are not a professional team. It's not a professional league. And so some guys are missing for games. And then the worst thing, right, when we went to Blackburn, God forbid, Newcastle United got into a cup final, right? And we went there with 10+2, you know, and we were lucky to get the 10 players to do that, because actually Newcastle won the cup that day. So we've had all these things.
Nobody in the North East has mentioned this at all.
As someone who quite likes Sunderland, I've never heard of this, but anyway, all those things coming together over the course of the season just was a bad season for us. But that doesn't mean next season we couldn't do better, and we would aim to do better in the NIHL. Season before, we struggled early doors and got better. We made the playoffs. We got beat with a goal by Billingham in the semi-final in the last minute. I think we were 4th or 5th the season before. But and we're going through a transition as a club where older players like Jordan Barnes is retired. We don't know yet if Skippy's going to be back or not for next season because of the injury. And we've lost a couple of senior guys, and we've got these young guys coming through. But we could cope staying in the NIHL. We wouldn't win the league next season, maybe the season after, right? But we wouldn't win the league, and it'd be difficult. But the recruitment side of things, we have found, as did Paul. I remember having a conversation with Paul Matthews years ago, telling me how difficult it was to recruit players in the North East. So we have to go down a line of growing your own. It's the only way, unless somebody moves or somebody, you know, gets a girlfriend in the North East. And we've always encouraged the girls in the North East to go and find hockey players all over the world, right? You know, unless that happens. And that's what's happened in our league. Some players have ended up at teams because they've met somebody and moved to the area. In fact, Adam Wood, who plays for us, had a great season last year. He moved to the North East because he met someone, and he's a teacher actually, and he lives and works in the North East. That's the only reason they got Adam Wood, because he happened to live there. Because it is 2.5 to 3 hours each way for anyone. So for us, you know, it's very easy. Oh, well, they got beat, so they've just went away in a bad mood. And Dops has been terrible, so they went away in a bad mood. By the way, the Dops issue isn't just Whitley Bay. There's other teams who have big issues.
We can talk about Dops in a minute. Don't worry about that. That's on the list in my head. Don't you worry.
So it's very easy to say that, but there's not one answer to this. You know what I mean? That's the bottom line. No. There's not one reason to say that's the problem. There's a number of things which have came together that say, look, let's try this. Let's speed different.
Which is why we have these conversations, of course, is to have that. You know, if there's nothing that BOTW has done over the last 14 years, it's try to add some nuance to kind of what's going on. I mean, you talk about the youngsters coming through and kind of growing your own. I appreciate this might pain some Warriors fans listening, but you do have to look down the road to Billingham and what they've been able to do in terms of growing youngsters. Obviously, the Buccaneers doing really, really well. They've got sort of a good young sort of crop of youngsters who've started working their way through. Buccaneers are very much kind of becoming stars players, and that took them a lot of time. Are Whitley fans going to be patient enough to wait through that process? Aside from the fact they're going to have to, but it does make me wonder. Like, obviously, you guys have looked at what is there. I mean, Billingham have benefited from having a team in NIHL 2. Do we see a second Warriors side kind of potentially coming up? Because I look to like Solway. Solway have a really good glut of kids who are sort of 15, 16, 17, who are now 16, 17, and 18. And now we have Solway Sharks, SNL, of course. You're the other new joining club into the Scottish National League. What's the plan? What's the big plan with these youngsters? Because of course, baptism by fire. There's no better way to learn how to be a good hockey player than to play hockey. What's coming behind? But what's coming behind it at the moment? Yeah,
there's a few things there where I totally agree. I can remember having a conversation with Stephen Foster about Patrick's Griegers when the racers weren't going to go ahead, and we weren't signing Patrick's again. And he phoned me about him to ask about him. I said, "Oh, Patrick's a great kid," and blah blah blah. And he was telling me at the end, this was just after COVID, it must have been, I think maybe just before. No, it was just after. And I said, look, Patrick's a nice guy, give you 100%, be suspended sometimes. And, you know, that's what happened with Patrick's. But he was telling me then that they made a conscious decision, right, to take it on the chin for a number of years, to bring young kids through and to put them on the ice and to play them and then going forward, they will be a better team. And that's what they did. The problem at the Warriors was then is they didn't because they couldn't. There's a big gap in the Warriors youth system. If you look at the ages of our players, there's not a treadmill of guys just ready to run onto the ice for them. And the rink were aware of this as well. We work very well with the juniors program. And we know there's a little clutch just now, but then there's another gap, and then there's another load of players coming through. I think COVID has a lot to do with that, people losing the love of the sport.
Yeah, and that was the issue. That was the issue Solway had. They kind of lost a bunch of kids who were sort of 17, 8, who were heading to these 17, 18, 19 now, because no one was allowed to do anything, especially in Scotland for the better part of a few months, because Holyrood was a bit more strict.
Yeah, and so there's a gap there for us, and other teams geographically can attract players. Look at Blackburn. Look at how many kids aren't from Blackburn that play for them now, because they've had to fill, because they've had the same issues as everyone else. We can't fill, and it's difficult. So the difference between us and Solway is playing in NIHL, and they've got a lot of really good players, good Scottish players, good imports. These kids can't get into that team, and they have to play somewhere. And so that's why a lot of them were playing in Widnes last year, out on loan. And if you look at other teams in Scotland, some of the quality players like Innes Gallagher, who's playing in Leeds now, he went on loan to Widnes as well, and boom, was taken away. So they see that as being a good thing for them. But I think they've taken a decision. We've got all these great kids. Why are they travelling all the way down to Widnes? We could put them into the SNL. And by the way, they'll be a reasonably strong team as well. We've got a lot of really good players. Write them off at your peril. So they'll be very good. But for us, we don't have enough players for a D2 team. But more importantly, they don't have the ice. Right? Because of the way the league wants games to be played, they would have to either throw off the women's team, which ain't going to happen anytime soon in Whitley Bay, or us, to actually get the ice time, because you can't get the Saturdays either. And so unless you're talking about face-offs at 10, 11 o'clock at night, which just won't happen in a kind of national league, then we did investigate this. Ourselves and Gary Wood from the Whitley Bay Juniors have investigated. The problem is the ice time to play, and also to train, because Whitley Bay ice is fairly rammed most of the time with different competing things. Very successful women's program in Whitley Bay, I hasten to add.
Indeed. The Beacons have been long-standing members of the elite league in women's hockey, of course, and they stream their games, commentary, and all those bits and pieces. The women's program in Whitley Bay is no joke, and one of the better ones in the country.
Definitely, and you can't go to them and say, well, you're going to move now, right, to bring in a D2 team. It's just not going to happen. So we have to work within the confines of the ice time. But also, I think what you would have there is some recce players playing, and that's no disrespect to recce players, right, who are a lot of good players that just can't commit the time that's required. But you would have that, and you wouldn't have the same level of young players coming through, because there is this gap in the system in Whitley Bay. So that's, as part of it. As part of this massive jigsaw that we've inherited in Whitley Bay, that we have to try and change. Going into Scotland, like I said, Tony and I have spoken about it. Tony made his debut for Murrayfield when he was 15, only because some guys were away at the World Championship. He could, in those days, put somebody in. Now, we've got some young players coming forward that may, during the season, be able to get a dispensation that you can do in Scotland to start to play. They may not be big enough. They may have not been in the national programmes or that. But we've got some really good kids coming through that we think by Christmas time will be regulars in the team. You've got, watch out for Ollie Jardine. He's a GB under 16 player who's going to be 16 this week, I think, or next, thankfully. Right, he's a very good player. Ethan Dunn, no relation, also a good player. George Cowie, and Mark Williams as well. These are good kids who are coming through, but there's not a lot more because of this gap. And so we get them training with us a year in advance. They train with the Warriors. These kids will be new to a lot of people, but they've been training with us for a year. And so it's about getting them on the ice and getting them playing as well. As for the Warriors fans, they're an interesting breed, right? They want to win, they expect to win, and they demand to win, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just sometimes you just can't win. Sometimes you're not good enough. And you've been poor.
I mean, let's talk some practicalities very, very briefly then, because you do briefly mention it, of course, but the Scotland has a program where 15-year-olds with dispensation are allowed to do bits and pieces with senior hockey. as members of the SNL, but an English club, how is that practicality going to work? Because of course your junior system is staying affiliated to the to England ice hockey. You are playing in a Scottish league where 15-year-olds can get that dispensation. How is that going to work, if at all?
No idea, but it will work.
Could you then get Scottish youngsters, for example, who might be at a junior club to come and play for Whitley Bay if that isn't available? You're probably going to annoy some Scottish clubs somewhere along the line, but pinching their youngsters, mind you. But it would be an interest. It provides an interesting issue because, of course, you are members of a Scottish league. The Scottish system allows one thing that the English system does not. And by the way, Henry Stalins, if you hear this, sort that out because you probably should. There's no reason to do it in Scotland and not do it in England. But there is you are fundamentally at a disadvantage as a result, albeit a small one.
Yes and no. The way I think it's going to work is these kids who are 15, you have to go through a whole process. It's not a given. They have to be physically ready. They have to be involved in national programs or on the cusp of national programs. So there's a strict criteria. I think last year in Scotland they said there was 5 or 6 players that got that.
Six was the number that Jamie Thompson gave us when we interviewed him this year.
It's not a given, but also it's not, if you say no in August, that's not it for the whole year. You can come back in January, so we might end up having players from other English teams, English juniors joining our juniors specifically for that, to be advanced, right? Because they will get that opportunity if they're good enough, maybe. But what we want to do is grow our own, because there's no sustainability for us as a club to bring these kids in for a year and then they just go back to where they are. And we won't attract Scottish kids to do that because they can do it in their hometown team. And so what Tony wants to do, like I said, he's been working with these kids who are coming into the team for over a year in training, and wants to do that with the younger kids. It doesn't mean he doesn't train the rest of them, by the way, right? But working with them so they know what's expected. We've worked with the juniors, and Tony's spoken to them at length about trying to create programs so when they go into our training and they go into our team, they know exactly what they're doing well in advance. It's no use, and some kids that we've had just weren't ready to step on ice. They came on later in the season. They're just not ready because they haven't been coached at a younger age to do. And this isn't disrespect, and this happens in all clubs and all teams. They're just not. Okay, it's very hard to please.
One 15-year-old is not the same as another 15-year-old, are they?
Yes.
Kids develop in different ways, but also different stages. And some might be, you could have 2 15-year-olds stood right next to each other, started at the same time. One might be ready for it, and the other one might be. And that's just sport, isn't it? And aptitude.
Jack Williams, who's coming into it, he was training with us all season, under the radar. Tony was like, I don't think. And just after Christmas, he really kicked on. He matured a bit as an individual, but as a player, he really got a lot hungrier and a lot better very quickly. And Tony came to me mid-February and says, we couldn't get that. We need to get this guy in the squad. And I said to him, we can't, because we never registered. He's registered as a junior, and to play up, you had to register him with the Warriors as well. And the cut-off date was the 31st of January. But we did that with George Cowie, who always looked good during the season. But it shows you that you can have these kind of. He's not a late bloomer because the guy's only 16, right? But he's benefited. He's benefited from the training. But that's what. This is funny because people talk about young players, and I look at them like they're 22. Right, they're 23. A young player for us is 15, 16. You want to get them before that age, really, to get them into a system and get them training and working, and particularly off ice. That's one of the things in our league that you see, and it's the same in Scotland as in England, where the older guys, when I say older, 25 and up, don't do the same amount of work off of the ice. And we see young guys who play for us who are going to the gym, playing roller hockey, working out, eating properly, and really wanting to succeed. And that they're the ones who will succeed because they've got the right attitude towards it. So we want to try and foster this whole thing going forward into Scotland and give them more opportunities than we think we'll be able to do in the NIHL North. And by the way, we're not there for a season.
No. If nothing else, it'd be very interesting to see what would happen if you did try to come back after a season, because of course a new entrant would have to go back into D2. I can only imagine what would happen to some folk in Whitley Bay if the Warriors were forced into Division 2. Although Sutton Sting would probably like the competition now. Telford have moved. The other practicality that we do need to touch on, you've mentioned it already, is DOPS. Dean Holland was on the back of a very, very large decision. Will that be upheld in Scotland, or can
Yes. We appealed that decision and were successful in that appeal to reduce the horrendous ones based on facts, not internet rumors, right? And I love some of the stuff I see online. I'm thinking that's not the case, right? So we appealed that and it came down. But any ban that a player gets in any league under IIHF legislation, when they move to another league, that ban still goes with them. So he would still be banned to probably just before Christmas. Owen Yarrow's another one. I think he's got 6 or 8 games for the end of the season. It's accumulation of points. That still stays in as well. If Owen went to Australia to play, that would still be there as well, because your registration transfers with it, and with that comes any existing bans. So it doesn't affect Dean's current ban, and hopefully his last one.
Have you had a conversation then with SIH about how, because obviously the disciplinary system is done slightly differently in Scotland?
Yeah.
Given some of the things you said in the last sort of 25 minutes or so, you feel a little bit hard done by NIHL DOPS, of course. And I did interview Alan and Ken at the beginning of last season. Have you had a conversation
in terms with them?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at this point.
Yeah.
Have you had that conversation with SIH about what the disciplinary system will look like? Because there will be differences between how things are done. Yes,
there is differences, and I had good conversations with Alan and Ken, and they're good people, right? And they have been left to make some decisions from other people trying to put legislation in place that isn't really pertinent in hockey. So don't get me wrong with, I think there's a role for DOPS to be played. One of the big differences in Scotland, in England, right, the way the system works is every game at the end of it, we have a Pixelot system. A lot of clubs use that. You have to upload the game by the Monday morning, and it goes to a central point, and every team has access to it at that point. In Scotland, you only upload if there's been a major penalty, and it gets uploaded to their version of DOPS, not to the other team. So you're encouraged to share film with other teams, so for training purposes, but apparently some teams don't. Video review. In England, a team can ask for a video review. In Scotland, it can only, there's a different level of criteria to do a video review, and it can only be done under certain circumstances, where there's a major penalty or something was completely missed. That was really quite bad. So there's a different system there. And I know, speaking to, I'm not going to name the clubs, other clubs, there was a real discontent in England last season where people felt that games were being re-refereed afterwards, that some clubs were going and looking through the game and trying to find something to lodge complaints about. A number of teams, I know I had a conversation with someone, if I put his accent on, you'd know who he was, who was like, when we're on the ice, we get on with it. Whatever happens, happens. And when we come off the ice, we all go have a beer and we get on with it, right? Whereas that's what I suppose the old school hockey is now. There seemed to be a lot of re-refereeing, embellishment of injuries. We've had that a couple of times last year, right? Which created extra penalties on people. We've had ones where some officials of linos have called stuff on us that was then later at DOPS not upheld, at the time. So we've had a bit of a raw deal, but that's not the driver behind this. We would still be in the NHL. We would try and change the way DOPS is being used. But a lot of clubs, or some clubs, feel it's being abused by other clubs to benefit them, and people being suspended at certain times. There was also situations, Anthony, where we had a situation with Dean Holland, right, where the video of an incident was leaked, and Billingham players had that and knew what the penalty he was going to get before we knew the penalty they were going to get. And I knew that video could only have come from one source or one place, because it was particularly edited in a way that only 5 people had access to it. And I trust the other 2, and I trust Tony, and I trust me, right? So that was out there, and that's annoying for us, that our players are going in there and the Billingham players are showing them videos of things that our guys knew nothing about at that stage. And that happened a lot. It happened with another incident earlier in the season with D-side as well, where the video was online before DOPS, and people are over-analysing it and all this, and on something that wasn't called as a penalty by the referee. And there was an interesting split amongst the public on that particular one, where there was a really shocking foul, or that was hockey. And there is this widespread thing. There's no, sometimes people have their own opinions of what happens and how it happens. Dean's one with Nottingham, was stupid. He says that he shouldn't have done that. It was a really stupid one and dangerous. It wasn't as bad as what the ban that came down was, and that's when the appeal was won.
I think the problem that occurs to me is that listening to that is that, yes, those things do happen because I have those conversations as well. But it's a vastly small number, Willie. Like, it's not as big. It's definitely not that large a number. And in fact, the majority of people I spoke to last year, yeah, people will grumble about DOPS and the like. We're not at least in the situation we had in 23-24 with people being called for checks to the head when they hit them square in the chest. Hi, Darcy Flanagan. Yeah. But ultimately these tools for the issues that they have raised, and you've raised some legitimate ones there, and of course, there are people who will try to game the system. That does happen in sport, but the benefit of these things vastly outweighs the negatives that you've raised.
I think the benefit, and I said that there should be a DOPS. I think the benefits of having a DOPS that's tighter, right, for particular things is there and works, and it cuts out some of the ones. But interesting facts with you, we had some horrendous bans this year, all done through DOPS. But yet our team penalties were not the worst in the league. Right? Other teams, players,
we've got all the large ones, but none of the 200 small ones.
We don't do anything by halves in Whitley Bay. If you're going to do it, you're going to get a ban. But we got some really bad bans, and sometimes it just wasn't worth going through, and it cost you money, by the way, to appeal.
Yeah.
And even if you're successful, you don't get the money back. No. And some people would say in a higher court that is a roadblock to justice. But you have to be able to pay to get an appeal. That's an interesting development. Could you imagine if you have to pay to go to court to get your speeding fine crushed or whatever? So it's an interesting one that you have to pay to do it. But I understand why, because there's some teams that be there every week, and there has been teams that are there every week.
So do you think then that, because obviously the National Division did pay more, they have their game review panels, so any major penalty would be reviewed on the Saturday or the Sunday evening when it came through. The impetus was on the home teams to upload that footage. Would Divisions 1, I mean, you can't speak to Division 2, but would 1 North and 1 South potentially benefited from having access to a system like that then? If you feel that DOPS on its own has swung the ban hammer too hard, you guys feel that you've been a bit hard done by, would of spending that extra bit of money to have those decisions made quickly in the main helped potentially?
Yeah, I think the quicker justice is done, the better. A good example, again, one of our players was done for unsportsmanlike conduct, right? Because he said something to another player on the Sunday. The Saturday morning, we were going to the coach to go to, I think it might be Nottingham, it was quite early in the morning. And I got an email to say that this player was banned, right? And I was like, well, wait a minute. He got like an unsportsmanlike conduct. What was it? 2 + 5, I think he might have got, if that. And he was banned. And I'm like, wait a minute. This is a week later. We had no incidents or no knowledge of this actually happening. But because they'd received something, they then had to go and check something. I won't go into too great detail. With the Ice Hockey UK, who said, oh, you need to do this. And the guy Owen Yarrow got 5 games, 3 suspended for unsportsmanlike conduct for saying something to a player. Now, I know the guys from DOPS weren't particularly happy that they had to do that. But regardless, that should have been done the week before. We've got somebody on the bus with us, or about to come onto the bus to go to a game, and we're getting told he's getting banned. That's not right. Regardless of the incident, whether he should have been, he shouldn't have been. In my view, he shouldn't have been banned for what he said. Right, but that's life. That's life. And by the way, I keep stressing about this. We ain't the only club that have issues with this. Right? There's a number of clubs in the NIHL North who have an issue of how it's being used. Not that it shouldn't be there, right? But how it's being used / abused by other clubs to re-referee games. And what the person from another club says to me is, it's making us enemies of each other now, because it's really bitterness after the event and everything, and it's making people not like each other, and that's not what DOPS is there to do. DOPS is there to look at instances that of player safety, right? And when you have ones that are upgraded from whatever to whatever, you're like, You're re-refereeing the games. The referees have to put reports in after events. And some referees also have been shown video so they can change their reports before they go in.
Let's move away from that then, and let's have a last season, like we talked about. It wasn't a great year. Tell me one thing that went right last year for the Whitley Warriors. Give me one positive. Let's put a silver lining before we talk about a little bit more about what's to come.
You know what? That's actually a tough one because it was such a horrendous year for us. I think on a personal level, what we're doing off the ice is developed very well in the identity of the club and working in the local community. We work with the local NHS in Whitley as well. We've introduced mascots over the last couple of years, and we do all these things with kids and that with kids' parties and all that. All the off-ice stuff was really good. On ice, for me, I think Adam Wood's performance over the course of the season, he got the Coaches Player of the Year, the Fans Player of the Year, and the Players Player of the Year. He was very good because he'd come back after he'd retired, and he was excellent for us. But I suppose the highlight last year would be we got new goals that were red and painted, and this year we've got a new ceiling. Oh, we also had a big screen last year as well. I forgot about it. So trying to make it more entertaining and more an event for families is something that we're working towards doing, and it's bit by bit. You can't just do it all in a winner. So that was good. The other thing I suppose is we got to know the players better, and the players got to know us better. They're all scared of Tony, right? But we work better with the players now, I think, than we did in the first year. And there's a kind of siege mentality came in, I think, towards the end of last year, which brought people together.
The one thing that came out and it was talked about was that you guys had a conversation with the players about this new venture. They're obviously on board enough to sign because, of course, you've got a roster. No goalies at the moment, if I remember. Just double checking.
No, Josh Crane was announced over the weekend. So
okay, there we go. He's not made his way. He didn't make his way onto Elite Prospect by the time I checked earlier. But Josh, you have at least one goalie. What was that conversation like? Because I imagine hockey players are creatures of habit at the best of times, as you will know, having hung around with them in over the last little while. But boys, we're gonna have a crack at the Scottish League. That must have been a very interesting conversation to have with the boys.
What I did in advance, and it's interesting because nothing got out right in advance of this until the day before. Right, from it publicly, that is.
Yes.
People were talking, but people couldn't quite nail it because, to be honest, we didn't know ourselves 100%. But for me, it was saying to the guys, "Look, this is a situation, and being honest with them. This is what the rink have told us. This is what they want to do, and this is the reasons why." Yeah. I think the key to it was the senior players, the leaders in the room, were like, "Yeah. This will be a lot. This will be good. This will be different." I'm one of the guys that I'm sick of going to Solihull and not having any plexiglass and people abusing me. And I'm like, that's how people feel about Whitley B. But we've got plexi. So the guys, generally, there was questions. A couple of guys were questioning it and saying, particularly like one or two about the standards, right, of it. From some quarters, that was surprising. But the vast majority were like, yeah. And more importantly, when Tony's had the conversation with them about signing, nobody's went, "No, I'm not signing. I'm going to no way play in Scotland." So far, I've got 19 signed already. Shh, don't tell anybody.
Oh, you mean you signed a roster of players and haven't announced them all? No, stop.
Yes.
Stop. This is the other thing, of course, to remember to regular viewers. Not announced is not the same as signed. They're all signed. Yes. They're just not announced yet.
I've just not told anybody.
It's a long summer. It's a long summer.
It's a long summer, and you got to keep people engaged over the summer. But and we've brought in Ben Richards has come back, who played a few years ago. He's come back this year. Lucas Campion came back from the States. He's been over there for a couple of years. He's a local lad as well, and we'll look to strengthen as well. So, but nobody at this point. We might get one or two. We've not spoken. We'll have spoken to everybody, but nobody. I'm not going to Scotland. I'm not doing that. Yeah. Which, to be honest, is a surprise. It's a surprise. But what they realise is the longer trips, they're back home on a Saturday night. Yeah. And not the Sunday.
Let's dangle a slight carrot then. Imports. Have we got imports lined up for this roster for next season?
Yeah, we'll have imports. In Scotland, by the way, I don't know if you know this in England, there's a slight difference with imports when you come to play them. in Scotland, 2 imports can't be on the ice at the same time.
Which is the old rule that used to exist in the in the NIHL.
Yeah, they've not changed that so far anyway. And also if one import is in the penalty box, the other import can't come on the ice because technically he's still
on the ice.
On the ice. So that's different. So yeah, we'll have imports. Yeah, it's difficult.
I'm sorry, Warriors fans. I nearly got to out of them, but not quite.
Yeah. Well, no one of them. It's difficult at our level to get imports because of the legislation around them now, and in Scotland as well, the SNL, it's the same as what NIHL 1 was, where it's like, you know, somebody who's here pre-Brexit, somebody who's a dual national, or someone who comes in as a full-time student, you know. So it's difficult, but not impossible. But again, you just don't know. You know, we got.
Do you look at those imports? Do you look at the fact that the D-side have announced their new American import today with NCAA Division 3 experience, played in Finland last year? Because D-side out of nowhere, you know, Jake Witkowski back for another year. This, you know, Tyler Delabasuche coming in goal. Do you still have a look at North One? Are you looking at North?
Yeah, they're all on my Facebook feed. Those 2 are interesting. They're done differently from all the other imports, shall we say, in the league. And you look at, like, you just don't know sometimes, though, right? We brought in Kyle Powell in our first year, and it so happened that Kyle's dad played with Tony at the Racers. He had access to a British passport. You look at his pedigree, WHL, and all the rest of it. And just didn't work out for him with us. You know, and he went down to Bristol again. I don't think it worked out, but then he got a gig in the East Coast Hockey League. Right, he's went to play in the ECHL, and then he's went to play somewhere else and done very well there. You know, it just didn't work out for us, and we thought, I mean, he's 6'4", 6'5", whatever, and a really nice guy. It just didn't work for him in Whitley Bay. You know. So you don't know sometimes when you're bringing somebody in, but it's hard. If you talk about Jake, who went in there last year to decide under a particular way. He's now employed as they're doing, I think, his business development or something with him. Yeah, which is a way you can get the visa system worked and everything. But he only went down there. I think his girlfriend stays near there. You know, again, it's sometimes it's chance. Sometimes it's absolute chance. Like Ottisa is the, in my view, the best import in the league down in Solihull. He works down there, you know, and that's why he's there, you know. So it is difficult, and you know, one of the things on the horizon that the league's going to have to look at is this. As a former politician, this thing in the ether about you can get a visa for 3 to 4 years for young people for movement within the European Union. Now that could be a way in the future you're going to get some Eastern European or whatever imports back into British hockey at the lower levels, where you can get the visa for them to come in and play in our league, because they could get this mobility visa that's going to be coming in. Just depends the fine detail of that, but that's 2-3 years away. So it's quite difficult to get imports. We just pray that Newcastle and Durham universities advertise in North America or Canada, you know.
The thought occurs to me for this upcoming season of you and Tony going back to Murrayfield. It's going to be a bit weird, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Well, we did it 2 years ago, and we won, right? And we won that cup there. We beat them Edinburgh and in Whitley Bay 2-1, and we won 2-0 in Murrayfield. And it was strange. It was strange for me. I'd actually popped in when I picked up Kyle Powell from the airport, and I bumped into Scott Neal, who I've known for years. And it was strange because we had built something in Murrayfield with the Racers that was, everybody told us you'll get 50 people coming along and all this, and we built something that got to a point that we just won the NIHL Cup. We were in the final of the Scottish Cup 2 weeks later. We would make the playoff finals as well, and we were really on a high, and then COVID hit us. And then the rink was, and again, I really need to, some of the myths I read online are just bizarre, that the team went bust and all this nonsense. It wasn't the case. The rink closed for 2 years, and what happened was, when the rink reopened, other people were running the rink or got a license to run the rink, and one of them was Scott Neal's sister Liz, and they decided to bring back the Edinburgh Capital. So we were not allowed to continue the Murrayfield Racers. It wasn't bust. In fact, we're probably the only team in Scottish ice hockey history that made some money. Right? So we didn't go bust, but we'd got to a point that we'd re-engaged with the public in the area, and Scott's done a good job at in Edinburgh Capitals in doing that and continuing it. You know, and when we went back, what the DJ who was there, he's away now, so I'll be able to tell you this, came up to me and says, you guys started this. Because it really reinvigorated hockey in Edinburgh, because when they were in the Elite League and they were always bottom of the league, they were having 200 or 300 home fans at a game. Now you go in the SNL and there's 1,000 to 2,000 fans there, because it's better engaged. It's local lads that you feel more for the win games. You know, it's winning's important as well, though they've not won the league in the last few years, but they're a good team. A lot of good players that we previously had at Murrayfield, and they've added to it over the last couple of years. But it is strange. You know, it must be strange for Tony, you know, when he goes in to the rink, and the amount of people that he sees that he's known since he was a kid playing hockey, who are still there, obviously a lot older now. But yeah, it is strange. And when I go to Murrayfield, it's kind of like being home for me, because I first went to see hockey there in 85. It was for a girl who took me right in 1985, and really got into it from that point of view. So yeah, it's strange, but you know, we're there doing the job with Whitley Warriors, and we're there to win. So it'll feel less strange if we win there, but that'll be hard. That'll be hard.
Let's ban you from getting a stovey if you do.
We don't do them anymore in Murrayfield.
No,
we actually put them on in Whitley Bay. I got the catering to put them on in Whitley Bay for when we played them when they came down, but they don't do stovies anymore.
I'll tell you a story, but I'll tell you my Murrayfield story once we stop recording about stovies. But the let's give, if we're not going to give the Warriors fans a name of anybody new and exciting, what's the goal? What does success look like next season? Because it would be really easy to say we want to win the lot, and I get that, because that's what every fan wants to hear. And I know that those folk up in Whitley Bay, they are, as you mentioned earlier, they want success and they demand success. But let's be honest here for a minute. What does success look like next season for Whitley? New league, new structure, new places to go. Lots of exciting, shiny new toys for people to play with. Lots of lovely away days. I'm sure everybody's going to enjoy, you know, going back, the old folk going back to Kirkcaldy, going back to Dundee. But I mean, aside from like not finishing bottom, what are your measures for success here for this season, really?
It's funny you should say that. I've been asked a number of times for pub guides to different rinks. Where's the nearest pub and things, you know? But I had a conversation the other day there about this. We are on a hiding to nothing, right? If we win everything, then it's actually a failure, because most people will say, look at them. They went to that league and it's obviously well beneath them and they've won it. If we win nothing, it's a failure. Right, because they'll say, look at them, they went to this league that is below them and they can't even succeed there. So I think if we won a trophy, it would be quite nice. If we win something, it would be quite nice. If we win it all, I think it actually defeats the purpose. If we win it all by a country mile, which isn't going to happen, by the way, it will not happen. I can guarantee you that, right? If we win it in a really tight three-way fight or whatever, it looks a bit better. If we fail to win by 4 or 5 points, great. You know, not great, because I want to win it all, obviously, right? But realistically, if we win something, then that's a step in the right direction, because we do have these kids and we'll get stronger year in year. But we're not going there to lose, right? And we're going to try and put the best team we can every week on the ice to compete as much as we can. And if we turn out to be the best team in the league, great. But nobody has won everything in Scotland, ever, right? You know, in the SNL this year, Dundee Rockets were tremendous in the league. I think they lost one game, but they didn't win I think it was the playoffs. They got beat in the semi-finals. And the same with the Scottish Cup year before. I think Aberdeen won the league, but Edinburgh, I think, maybe won the playoffs. Somebody else won. I think it was Kirkcaldy won the Scottish Cup. So it is a league that anybody on a given night can beat anybody else. So for me, winning something, because they've actually got really nice trophies, by the way, winning something would be good. It would be a good marker for us. Winning nothing, I think, is a failure. Winning everything is equally a failure. So win something nice.
As we sort of edge towards the end of our time together, I'll ask the question, because I'm not sure if I asked the man himself that I wouldn't get some sort of self-deprecating answer that really didn't kind of actually answer the question. But Tony Hand is at the moment, and I say at the moment because I do wonder if a certain Sheffield youngster might surpass him in the upcoming years. But at the moment, Tony Hand is the best British ice hockey player of all time. What is he like to work with? Because I'm fascinated to hear this, because I've had this conversation with players who've been coached by him, who played with him. Your relationship with him is very different because of the nature of what it is. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts and reflections on Tony Hand.
You really want to get me hung, don't you? Tony is difficult to work with, right? Because he demands the best, and anybody that demands the best is difficult to work with, right? Him and I are different characters, completely different characters. Funny enough, a meeting a few months ago, somebody with the owners of the rink, they said, you used to actually work very well together, in completely different fields. I don't, like, I think the previous GM would basically, like an assistant coach, would go on the bench. I don't do any of that. I sit with the fans for my sons at the games. I don't go onto the bench. I'll go between periods and whatever. And the team stuff is very him. It's very compartmentalized between the two of us. But he's very demanding. Like, demanding of me as an individual, demanding of the team and the players as individuals. Some of them can meet that, some of them can't. Same with me, because I feel sometimes as well. So he is quite difficult, but also quite fascinating. And you're right about the self-deprecating answer. And that's the answer he'll always give. I've seen him a number of times, people saying, oh, the greatest British ice hockey player of all time. And he'll say, well, yeah, thanks for saying that, but there's other guys who are really good as well, and and he talks about players. I don't know if you saw the documentary about him that's on Amazon Prime, called The Other Side of Edinburgh, which is, I think that just scrapes it a bit. I don't think that goes as deep with it. His mum's the star of that, of course, but you look at the points that he's had in the British League, and I don't think anybody will ever surpass the points that he got in British hockey. And it's easy to argue, oh, hockey was different then, blah, 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 right? But, the level that I saw him as a player, and he was just incredible, an incredible vision. As a coach, I think sometimes he finds it harder to coach players who don't think like him, because he can think 2 and 3 moves in advance. I think he's got into a comfort zone with that. But he can't, like everybody, he can be difficult to work with. But we also have, bear in mind, I don't have to also work with him. I have to sit in the car with him for 2.5 hours down and 2.5 hours up for training or games, particularly after games. And I have to it's like when you were a kid and you were playing football or playing hockey and you were in the car and your parents would moan at you. I have to deal with that. I have to relive the games through Tony with it as well. But we have a good laugh as well. Don't get me wrong, we have a good laugh. Some of the journeys and things, but other times, and Whitley B, they're not. It's not our team. We weren't brought up as Whitley fans, but that doesn't mean we don't care about it and we don't buy into it. And that's one of the things that annoys me the most when I see some comments about it. We both give a lot to the cause of Whitley B, and we want to win. We never came to Whitley not to win. Right, and certainly last season was just horrendous from that. We did technically win something the year before. So yeah, he demands. He's very demanding. That's probably the polite thing to say.
We'll end then on that message then to the Warriors fans. What is, you've said it all in press releases. Let them hear it. Let them hear what they need to hear. Where are we now? We're recording this. It's Monday the 9th of June as we're talking. Face off for the first adventure of the Whitley Warriors into the Scottish National League is the better part of 2.5-3 months away. What do the Warriors fans need to hear right now to make sure that they're on board and make sure that they know something good is around the corner?
I think they are on board. I was surprised when it came out. There was an initial flurry of, oh, that's miles away, this is terrible, blah, blah. But I think most people have bought into it because the players have bought into it. And in terms of the message to the fans is support them. Support the players, particularly young players who are coming in this year. Support the club. And they do normally support the club, support the vision. It's going to be an adventure. It's going to be fun. I think the second season is going to be a lot harder than the first. I think the first season is going to be fun. for a lot of them, particularly those away fans who come on the buses. But support the team, buy sponsorship packages, come along and do what you do best, and that is raise the rafters at Hillheads and make as much noise as possible to back the team.
Just having a quick squiz on Google Maps. There's at least 4 pubs within walking distance of that rink in Aberdeen. If the rink bar doesn't do it for you, all the best then to the Whitley Warriors on this fascinating new adventure. We will all be keeping an eye from a distance, I'm sure. Willie, thank you very much for your time this week.
No problem, anytime.